I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:23, July 10th, 2014. So start the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, and welcome to the City of Soledad Special Planning Commission meeting. It is 6:23, and I'm calling today's meeting to order. This special meeting will also be streamlining on the city's social media platforms for the convenience of our community and for viewing purposes. So we'll start with item number 2, which is the commissioner roll call. So thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Josie Perez Aguilera,
Present.
Vice Chair Sergio Diaz,
Here.
Commissioner Sammy Fuerte,
Present.
Commissioner Roberto Cruz,
Present.
Commissioner Lorenzo Sanchez.
Present.
So all 5 commissioners are present and we have a quorum. Let's continue on with the meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. You may all be seated. Next up, we go on to item number 4, onto the public comments, announcements, and unscheduled appearances. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on items of interest to the public that are within the matter jurisdiction of the planning commission. Speakers shall have a limited time. Please be brief and to the point. No action or discussion shall be taken on any item not appearing on the agenda, except that commission members may briefly respond to statements made and questions posed by members of the public. Are there any public comments in chambers? None? Okay, any Facebook comments?
We don't have any via Zoom.
Oh, okay, so no comments via Zoom, and did staff receive any written comments?
No.
No? Okay, so seeing that we have none, we will close the public comments. So on to item number 5, presentations. We have 2 presentations today. The first presentation is Affordable Housing Overview by Beatriz Trujillo, our housing analyst.
Good afternoon, commission members. Is that on? No.
Let's see if Mike can hear you. Cause you won't, we won't hear you, but the Zoom should hear you. Mike, can you hear Beatrice?
Oh, I think it's okay. You should be able to hear me now. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Good
I can
afternoon.
hear everybody. I can hear everybody. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening or good afternoon, still commission members. I'm Beatriz Trujillo. I'm the housing analyst, and the following presentation is gonna be around, actually, give me 1 second. I had the pro housing first, but you have affordable housing first on the agenda, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I can go to the affordable housing presentation first. Okay, so affordable housing overview. This presentation is informational. I just want to present to you some of the information around the upcoming developments with a big focus on affordable housing and how that will tie into meeting our requirements from the housing element. So let's start with looking at our demographic information as a city. So even though our population is estimated to be in the 25,000 people, some of this population is part of our headquarters, our group quarters, which is the state prison. So I wanted to break it down for you. So around close to 18,800 is residents in Soledad in the city, and then the other close to 7,000 is people living in group quarters, which is the state prison for most of that population for us. The ethnicity is mainly Hispanic. I think we are the jurisdiction in Monterey County with the highest Hispanic Latino population. And then we have white, African American, Asian, Native Hawaiian, and American Indians. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders. Our age, most of our population is between 30 and 44 years old. We have a small older population, but we also have a good percentage of our population that are little ones, kids under 15 and under. From this population, the language that is mainly speaking in our city is the Spanish, followed by English. And then we also have some Indo-European languages and Asian Pacific Islander languages, and we have a small percentage of others. Now, it's still demographic information, but a little closer to housing is our housing composition. So the city of Soledad has 3,732 households according to census data. And a small percentage of our homes are occupied, 11% of our homes are occupied by homeowners that live by themselves, so one person per household. We have 41% of our households that their family size is between 2 and 4 people in a household. And most of our households they have 5 or more people living in a house. The income from our population, it's gonna be, I'm gonna present it right here as the area median income, and then in the later slide, you will see the salary so that you can compare the AMI to the 2023 income limits. So most of our population is making over 100% of the area median income. The second largest percentage is in the between 51% and 80% area median income. And I also wanted to show you housing, if people are tenants or owners. So most of our homes are owner occupied, 63% of our homes are owner occupied, and 37% is renter occupied. So now this ties a little bit, now that we heard a little bit about the demographics, how does this tie to our RHNA allocation? So regional housing needs allocation, which is established determined by the state in our local MBEC, is determined every 8 years. So it's updated every 8 years. This is the amount of housing that the city has to plan based on our income levels, our population income levels. The allocation is divided between all of the local cities within a county, or actually within a region. And so that you know, initially when we started the new RHNA numbers, we had a higher number that was requested from us, but we saw a pattern that cities closer to the peninsula were not developing housing units as much as we were, even though we still have some gaps. The peninsula cities were not as developer friendly as other cities in the county. So even though we started with a higher number, we were able to negotiate and get a lower number, which isn't bad. Having a lower RHNA is not bad. And then peninsula cities increasing the expectation for the upcoming RHNA cycle. So, and as I mentioned, this is updated every 8 years. So we just completed the RHNA 5th cycle. And unfortunately, we did not meet the goal from some of our income levels. And that's the great chart that you see on the screen. Sorry, I'm giving myself feedback. So for that very low and low income, we are way under what RHNA required from us in the 5th cycle. We only produced 6 units, and as you can see, for low and very low, the expectation or the requirement was to build 76. For moderate, we were pretty close. We built 31 units, and we were required to build 35. And for above moderate, we exceeded. So as you can see, most of the units that we built, even though it's good that we are having production, it's not a production in the income limit that was required by the RHNA 5th cycle. But that's the chapter that we're closing, and we are on to a new chapter. So let's try to focus on RHNA 6th cycle and making sure that we meet those requirements. So for the very low income, which is 50% of the AMI and below, And right now, the income limit for that is 56,000 or less. We need to build 100 units before 2031. For low income, which is, 51 to 80% AMI, we need to build 65 units. For moderate income, we need to build, 186 units. And for, above moderate, we need to build 376 for a total of, 724 units that we need to build within the RENA 6 cycle. And something to highlight is that we already did not meet the RENA 5th cycle goals. And the state is really coming at jurisdictions that are not meeting those requirements. There's, builder remedy, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but no meeting RENA can get us in serious trouble with the state. So now this is the affordability table. This changes every year. It's adopted by the county. It's a collaboration between the state and the county. Really, the state will set up some of the income limits, but this affordability table that you're seeing on the screen is adopted by the county every calendar year. So right now, because we are in 2024, we're looking at the income limits from the previous year, 2023. And I just wanted to give you an example so that every time that I talked about the AMI, that you get an idea. I like to focus usually, to create a little bit more context on a family of 4, low income, it's 96, 350, just because I think that's an average family size, and I like to base just for me to have some perspective, I look at that number, but if there's another number that you wanna look at to give you perspective, you're more than welcome to do that. I just wanted to put this on the screen. And also, when we talked about housing production, as you can see, some people with extremely low and very low income. The battery died on me. I think he does have battery there.
So, Alicia, can you go 6? Irmã, calma, linda.
Sorry, just 1 second.
I'm switching out some batteries, so give us 1 second. You're online on Zoom.
I can't see.
So, what they build.
It could be worse, which is one.
You wanna walk around with the mic?
I can't blow on that now. It's working. It's really, no, seriously, like, well, you did that, blow in there.
Okay, it looks like full battery, so this will take us to the next. I'll find that. Okay, technical issue, but coming back to this, looking at the income levels and the cost of housing, really, what's suitable for people making low and below, any, their AMI is in the low and below low. It's the type of housing that is more suitable for them is rental, because homeownership might be too difficult in our current market, and it might be unfair for those people to try to push them to homeownership and not being able to sustain their home. So really more suitable, low, very low and extremely low, rental housing is more suitable for them. On the moderate income, I think people can be able to afford, an affordable unit. However, these units also tend to be a smaller units so that people can actually afford it. If you have looked into our housing market, we don't have really that many units going out for sale, and when we do, the prices are about the $500,000. So for people making this type of incomes, even though they don't seem as low as other parts of the state, it's a still not enough to afford a $500,000 home, or sometimes even, the price might be higher than that.
And they may not even qualify for the loan, so, he was bringing up,
Yes,
a good point about that.
yeah, and we can elaborate more during, Q&A, but the other piece is that, when people have this income, we don't know their income to debt ratio, if they actually qualify for a loan. We can definitely talk more about that, but I just wanted to give this, as perspective. Now, the affordable housing cycle and financing, it's a lot different from the market rate process. So when we start talking about affordable projects, they tend to take longer to be completed, and it takes longer for them to start seeing a return on their investment. So on the left, you're gonna see the kind of like the cycle from when a project begins with a project concept all the way to capitalization, which takes a while, mainly because to understand why it takes longer, we have some of the capital resources, with market rate. A lot of the capital resources are based on equity and mortgage, and that's sufficient to carry a project to the finish line. When we're talking about affordable housing, because it is an affordable unit, we are gonna see a big gap. Mortgage and equity, it's not the same as a market rate property. And so we need to find tools that will get us to the finish line, and that's where we play an important role. And that gap is not just money, even though here I put it under capital sources. That gap is also on streamlining the process, on creating the environment for affordable housing to actually be successful in the community, to actually attract affordable housing developers. So that gap, it's money, but it's also policies that we can play a role in. And these are some of the expenses that faces for a affordable housing project. We have pre-development, we have construction, we have the permanent expenses, the permanent period. Once the project has been built, it doesn't mean that they're not requiring any more expenses, but they are still keeping the units affordable, so they will continue to have expenses, and then operations. So for every one of these categories, I gave you some ideas of what the expenses might be. For example, for the pre-development, we have the site acquisition, we can have the design feasibility, the feasibility study, the funding sources can be public agencies, like the city, like we are a public agency, and we can help, like if we have existing land and we want to work with a nonprofit developer or an affordable housing developer to build the housing, we can offset some of those costs. But as you know, our funding is also limited. We don't have a lot of money that can go into that gap. Construction, as you can see, in every one of these phases, there is room for a public agency to support that phase of the development. But you can also see on the funding sources for every single category or for every single phase, that all of these funding sources have ties to them, and that requires compliance, and that requires time, and that takes a lot of administrative tasks that an affordable housing developer will have to comply with in order to have enough resources to make the project happen. The subsidies like Section 8, all of that, tax credit, equity, all of that takes a lot of administrative time. So what is the city responsibility when building affordable housing? Like I mentioned, like it's a responsibility to create, not to develop the housing necessarily, we can, but it's not always financially feasible. But it's more a responsibility to create the environment for housing production to happen. It's also a responsibility to approve those density bonus and get them to the finish line. It's also a responsibility to create housing programs. That's for ownership and also for rental. When we have tenants, we also need to have programs for those tenants. Gap funding, even though we don't have, especially because we're a smaller jurisdiction, we don't have as much funding that we can allocate for gap funding, for gap financing. But if we do, it's our responsibility to help affordable housing with that. And one that is very, very important is streamlining the permits. Every time that an affordable housing project needs a permit, we were able to support that project to move along or to create as few hurdles as possible. That's our responsibility as a city, to work with our projects, with the developers. And also the state has an involvement and a responsibility. Lately, the state has been very involved in wanting to streamline the production of affordable housing, different unit sizes. But one of the things that the state has done is reduce the parking requirements. We keep hearing that because I know with new construction, people often think of more cars. But actually, the state law can, excuse me, the state law is to reduce the parking requirements, and that's up to the state, not up to the city. That's controlled by the state. Also, the ADUs, as you know, the ADUs became very popular, but it started as a state initiative, and we are, as jurisdictions, we are mandated to also be part of that initiative, and that's why you see now a lot of ADUs being approved, streamlined, and we don't have to come to planning commission for an ADU unless there is a major issue with it. But for the most ADUs, we have the pre-approved plan for really streamlining that. It was a state mandate. The state also mandated that now small lots can be subdivided, and that's a single family dwelling unit can now be subdivided to accommodate 3, 4 units. Especially for us, for Soledad, the older side of town, we have really big lots. Those owners can now subdivide their lot and have multiple housing units. Affordable housing is also now entitled to 80% to an 80% density bonus. So for example, even if our municipal code or a land use regulation says that a project can build up to 10 houses, if it's an affordable project, it's actually 18 houses or 18 units. For housing, the state is also taking a really strong stand on making sure that affordable housing is built from an affordable housing lens. That means avoid segregation, that this new affordable housing is coming online in areas of opportunity, that we're not just creating separate neighborhoods for people with lower incomes. And the other one is that the state also now has land use, and I think some of these initiatives that I mentioned previously fall under a little bit of this, which is that the state has land use authority over jurisdictions. If the state thinks that jurisdictions are over-regulating affordable housing development, the state can come in and they can be the ones to determine the projects that are approved in our jurisdiction. And that's also part of the builder's remedy when a jurisdiction is not compliant. The builder's remedy, if a jurisdiction has, since it's off compliance with their housing element and we are not meeting our RHNA numbers, the state can come in and apply a builder's remedy. So you're gonna see a little bit more of this with the housing element presentation, but I just wanted to give you an overview that even though we did not meet our RHNA 5th cycle requirements, we think that we are on track to meet the 6th cycle with some of the projects that we already have on our pipeline. So on this chart, what you see is at the very bottom of the chart, you're gonna see the 6 RHNA cycle requirements by affordability level, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the total number of housing units that we need to produce is 724, 100 in the very low, 65 in low, 186 on moderate, and I'll come back to this one, and 376 on above moderate. I listed some of the projects that we have in the pipeline. The first projects, most of the projects have been entitled with the exception of parcel B and Almond Acres. But even though they haven't been entitled yet, we expect that they will be completed before the end of this RHNA cycle. I want to come back to Moderate income, if you see on the projected total of units, on this chart, it says that we will be building 173, but our requirement is 183. And that's because one of the projects that is finishing construction right now, Las Viviendas, there are 10 units that are moderate income that we haven't accounted for yet, but that will be built this year. This is a project that was already approved and it's just, getting to the finish line. So that's why this project is no longer in the pipeline. It's happening as we speak. And we have 10 moderate income units coming online from the last two phases of Las Viviendas. And now I wanted to show you also a map of the housing projects. As you can see, a big project is Miramonte, and we're gonna see a lot of housing happening there. But the other projects, I want you to see that they're spread throughout town. Even though this is not taking into account all of the affordable housing, I know we also have the San Benito apartments, the Chispa apartments that are closer to the other side of town that we don't see any of the pins on this map. But the idea is that we don't just, build affordable housing in one side of town, but that we're actually making sure that it's across the board. And you don't see more pins on the Frank Ledesma Elementary School side because we already have some projects that are affordable there. We have the San Benito, we have Chispa, and we have also some houses that have ADUs from Chispa on that side of town. But I wanted you to get a visual of the different areas of town where this project will be built. I'll leave them up on for a little bit, but this is my last slide, so if you have any questions or comments, I'll take those.
So what happens if we don't meet our RENA numbers? Do we get fined? Do we get penalized?
We can get fined. The state also created the builder's remedy, which is that they can come into our city and take jurisdiction over our housing, land use, authority. Thank you, that's the word. Do you want to speak a little bit more on that, Megan? So I'll turn it over to Megan.
Yeah, so, and luckily this hasn't happened to us, but it's starting to happen in other jurisdictions where a builder can come in and they can essentially say that the jurisdiction hasn't met their RENA numbers. And, as a result, I want to build in this location. And I want to apply the builder's remedy, which means I can apply whatever I want and trump essentially whatever land use, whatever zone we have, and build that housing. So, it hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it won't, but it's starting to happen in some jurisdictions, especially NIMBY jurisdictions that have been rejecting low income or affordable housing. So, we definitely don't want to be in that way. We're very close. We have been working back and forth pretty hard to get HUD to like the draft that we have, so I think we're very close to getting something adopted. So we, in the past, and a lot of reasons why jurisdictions didn't meet their RENA numbers was there's no teeth. And the state just said you had to plan for them, and if nothing happened, oh well, next year next cycle, you have another chance at it. But this cycle, there's actually a fair amount of teeth because jurisdictions didn't build, especially on the affordable housing side. I think about 3/4 of the states or the jurisdictions, which is somewhere like 468, I don't know, something like that, haven't met their RENA numbers. So you can see how deficient for years and years of not having the teeth. How now jurisdictions are scrambling to meet those numbers, because I don't think anyone wants to lose land use control, because you as a planning commission know better than anyone. You live here, you're invested in the community where housing, especially denser housing, makes sense.
Thank you.
I had a question that's with the builder's remedy, that's just for land use. So if the state were to come in, would the builder still have to abide by the standards of the city? Or are they allowed to build?
It's not really the state would come in, the builder would have the ability to invoke the state's involvement and say, I wanna build this housing here. And you don't have to comply with design guidelines or anything, so, that's why I think a lot of jurisdictions are panicking and wanting to make sure that they're compliant, because, yeah, you know, you might have really nice design standards, and now the builder can say, I'm just building this, you know, box of a building in this area that may or may not fit. And design is a really important tool, because even if something is denser, even with density bonus, because we can't restrict that, we still have design control, so we can make sure that even if housing is built sort of dense, it's still fitting into the neighborhood. You could look at roof lines to make it less boxy and other things. But if they take it over, it could be bad.
And then, I'm not sure if you would answer, or Megan, we didn't meet the 5th cycle RENA numbers as a state. Are we already like on a probation or anything, or?
Yes, actually, yes. The state has looked at the numbers and has identified us for not meeting our numbers in the low, very low category, and that the builder, because we don't have a 6th cycle yet element, people can actually ask for the builder's remedy. So that's why we don't want to delay adoption of the housing element. We're on the naughty list.
And just to add in regards of Commissioner Sanchez's question too, the RENA numbers are really important for us because it also helps us with funding for our housing programs. So if we're able to say that we're meeting our RENA numbers, then the state and HCD would most likely be able to help us or award us more funding for any kind of affordable housing or first-time home buyers programs or anything like that. So it's always really good to be able to meet our numbers or be progressive in regards of our numbers.
In one of the slides, you show, for cycle 5, can you go back to that, there where it shows that, I think there was only 6. There was only 6 that was billed, right? Is that right? For low and very low. So where does the density bonuses that all these developers came along here, that received density bonuses through all this time, there's only 6 that
So-
were.
Construction.
These units are having fully built. So some of these projects, some of these units that were built in this 5th cycle were entitled before then. So we have more control of the projects that we have entitled, and that's why you see a very comprehensive list of the pipeline projects. Those are the projects that we're probably all more familiar with. This, the 5th cycle has a history, like an older history, and it was before my time, and some of the projects that were built, they had 0 affordable houses, or they were provided with an alternative to maybe identify another site where they will later build the affordable housing. We cannot do that anymore. Affordable housing has to be built simultaneously as market rate housing. Also, the units
That don't fall under that?
Las viviendas, yes, but las viviendas partially, so las viviendas, because they are ownership, most of the 31 units that you see here, are from las viviendas.
The moderate.
For modern.
The moderate. Yeah, and then we're also accounting for some of las viviendas in 2023 because they were not built out completely I mean, some of them we're gonna account for them this year because they were not completely built out before the end of 2023.
Another question I have, and I forgot what slide it is from, but you mentioned that potentially the better fit for a very low or low income would be a renter, right? For someone to rent. Is that the message that's being, set out there to the community? This is your income, this is what you could afford? Because I feel like the community expects not to rent. They expect to purchase.
No, and people can work their way into ownership, but we as a jurisdiction, we also need to be mindful of the tools that we're giving people to be ready for ownership. If people are having to pay high cost rent and they're trying to save up for ownership, they're not gonna be able to save up for their down payment. So we need to provide the option also for rental, so that hopefully people are not always gonna stay in low and very low, but that they eventually are ready to be a homeowner. But if we don't provide that stepping stone, that for some people it's a rental unit, a decent price rental unit, if we don't provide the stepping stone, then we're also preventing them from being ready to be a homeowner.
And I agree, and I think everybody here agrees that there's stepping stones to eventually get to your dream forever house, right? But is that the expectation for some of the public? Where they're expecting a low income house to be 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house for $300,000? Right? Is that the expectation that being projected?
Sure. I was gonna say we have to educate people, because the reality is, even if the home was, a lot of, as people who own a home know, that there's always a cost of maintenance. And so for a lot of individuals, even if they have a very small mortgage, if they have to repair the roof or, you know, just the cost of utilities and so forth are really expensive. So we have to educate people to understand that they may not own a home because of the income. So I think that's a community, but we can give people, you know, good housing. What I see in Soledad and much of the Salinas Valley is people are living, a family is living in a bedroom right now, renting. That's not, you know, living with a quality of life or dignity. And if we can build quality rental housing where you're living in a, you know, a decent space, maybe you have 800 square feet instead of 150 square feet, that's good. And that helps. Maybe it's not the ownership pathway for you, but it can be the ownership pathway for your children. You
And I
know,
guess I think about the viviendas, which that in theory should have been, right? A stepping stone to a bigger house, but yet they're there and they don't sell.
They are actually selling a lot, and I don't know if.
Is that recently? Because
Yeah.
they sat there for a while.
They did, and I don't know if it's marketing, because actually this team, you know, with the new staff on board, did a lot of extra marketing, but they're selling like really fast, like hotcakes. But I will say that another opportunity is we also have to be cognizant of our community, and so by creating smaller small lot subdivisions and these kind of condos or townhouse developments, that's opening the door to even people in low income, because those units are selling under 500,000. So there is ownership opportunities in some of these alternative forms, whether it's a condo, you know, townhouse or small lot family house. Maybe, you know, some of those folks, not in the very low income, but maybe a few of those low income people can qualify. And then we're seeing that actually for Las Viviendas, that there have been people, we have low income units that are selling, which I thought maybe not that they wouldn't, but now we're seeing it, so.
Given the situation on the density component and just looking at, you know, neighborhood communities, larger neighborhood communities. And given that we have only so much land usage, do we foresee to meet the RENA numbers that we would end up?
I'm sorry, could you?
Oh, I'm
pop it
sorry.
to the-
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay. Would we foresee looking at selling apartment units as homes like they do in the San Jose area in the Silicon Valley?
so, depending on the financing of the apartment, it's pretty hard to do. The reason why you can do it in San Jose and other areas like that is that the cost that you can get for those units is really high. So you might, you know, for our little community, you know, we're looking at 500,000 and 600,000 homes as the average, and there it's like, you know, 1 million plus. So if you're paying 600,000 or 700,000 for, you know, a apartment or a condo in a kind of a stacked complex, it's, you know, doable. But because of the cost of doing some of the higher density housing, it's really hard to make it pencil in our community other than for rental.
And I just one more question, as I was looking over the numbers on what the average costs were, I mean, I understand the averages, but the reality is when I'm looking through, you know, what was quoted here as the average is on the low end of what the rental costs are. Because I've seen one bedrooms in a home go for up to 3,000 with a shared bathroom and, you know, a shared kitchen or whatever. And I understand that we're looking at averages, but when we're looking at a rental apartment or whatever, I just envision a trap for a lot of our lower income families, you know, getting caught in that just rental life.
And these rental units, I should specify, are deed restricted, so they would not be able to charge what is being charged out there today. Those are considered market rate units, and what I noticed in all of Monterey County, but it's particularly acute in South County, there hasn't been a lot of larger apartment complexes. There's a very slim supply, so that drives up the price. And if you look at areas that have been building a little bit more of that product, there's not that same pressure. So South County, where you would think, I saw like an ADU unit that was like almost $3,000 and it's like 600 square feet. I mean, that's crazy. And I think it's because if you look, we don't have an apartment complex right now. I just looked, you know, we have one hopefully coming online soon. So there's no competition, and that really also drives up prices. But the units that we're projecting here, they're gonna be affordable. They're gonna be way under what we're talking about, because you can only pay 30% of your income towards housing. So when you look at these income levels, you're really talking like 1,500 for a 2-bedroom, and so significantly less than what we're seeing.
Thank you.
Excuse me, is there a way we can control that and make sure that prices do stay under a certain amount?
Yeah, so for all of the affordable units that I showed on the projection sheet, the affordable projects, what's going on the opposite direction? All of the affordable units are gonna be deed restricted, and we have to monitor that every year. We need to make sure that people are not paying more than 30% of their income in rent and utilities. It includes both.
Question for you. So I know we've talked about the issues with the income as well as the RENA numbers, and then also what we're actually building, right? Obviously, we're not meeting our numbers. And as Megan mentioned, we do have to have some teeth in this. You did bring up a slide where there were some options for financing, land use. Can you bring that up again?
Sure. Was it this one?
No, that one, the affordable house, no, not that one. So the one that had options of what we could do, which included like the Section 8.
Okay, it's this one, right?
Yeah.
So it's a funding sources.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Okay, so these are things that we can do for expenses and sources of funding. Have you looked into other cities comparable to Soledad to see what they're doing with their expenses and sources of funding and what's working for them, that we can also leverage the strategy?
Okay, this one is more, I understand your question, but I probably didn't explain the table, accordingly. This is more an idea of like the different phases that an affordable housing project has, and then the expenses that can go tied to each phase.
Right.
And the possible sources of funding.
Right, and so what I'm asking for is, well, are there any other cities comparable to Soledad? Let's say, for example, in the pre-development phase, that are using certain public agencies, so they figured it out which agencies they can use to fund the pre-development. And in the construction, you know, a construction lender and so forth. Are we looking into that to solve the problems, the funding problems?
We are definitely looking into what are some of the strategies that work in other places that will work for us, but we're also looking at do we have, for example, 540 is a good example, and we realized that that land was available, that we will be able to purchase it. So now we have the site, which is one of the expenses in the pre-development. We have the sign, we are gonna RFP it for an affordable for a developer that will build affordable housing, so now they don't have that expense, we are coming in with the site,
Mhm.
so we're removing that expense on them so that we can incentivize development.
Okay, so do we have any more of those projects in the pipeline to solve our problems?
Yeah.
Because that one was a really good one. Yeah, I agree with it, but what I'm hearing is we've got, issues with RENA, we know that the income levels are not there. So yes, we do have a rental option, so what have you. But for me, you mentioned the city is responsible for, meeting all of these needs or finding sources, but I'm not hearing any answers
So
or solutions.
I think maybe, we probably should re-explain this. This is not the city's responsibilities. This is how a affordable housing developer, these are all of the ways that they try to fund these aspects of a development. So for example, tax credit, they have to apply for tax credits. What the city does is we set up the stage for them to be successful. So a good example with tax credits, for example, we don't put any money, but we expedite their plan review so that they can, because there's only 2 windows each year that they can get into.
Mhm.
So the city would fast track so that they could get into a window. That would be a way that we would set the stage
Mhm.
for them to take advantage of some of these funding sources. And the city, unfortunately, we're not, we apply for grants, so we do look for grant funding. But other than that, we don't really have any monies that we can necessarily put to housing. We had the best tool of all went away, which is redevelopment. So we were fortunate, we had redevelopment money left over for housing that the city never spent. And we were able to purchase 540 Gavilan, which is 4.6 acres. And that's probably one of the most common tools that cities use to incentivize housing. We also partnered with the school district, same thing, using the land that we have as a way of helping facilitate the gap. But we are looking into different tools, but every city has, probably our best tool besides what I'm mentioning is inclusionary housing. That we put some of the responsibilities onto the developer to ensure that they provide deed restricted housing.
So,
Sorry, I wanted to, just one more part, maybe it'll answer your
Mhm.
question. We are also, and this is just an introduction to like the affordable housing. But within the next presentation or the public hearing, we'll be touching more on the housing element, and that's when we're very specific on the programs and policies that we're proposing as a city in order to meet the RENA numbers. And I think that's the question that you're asking, to see what we're proposing.
yeah, how can we help solve this problem? So I get it's not the city's responsibility to find sources of funding for the developers, and then the developer obviously has to determine if it's a good return on their investment, whether they want to go affordable, they want to, just go regular, right? I mean, they have to do the math and it has to work for them, right? So in the sources of funding, and I know you said you fast track the tax credits, but do we also provide this information of sources of funding to those developers and make it easy for them to say, okay, hey, you can get these type of fundings if you do these type of housing, so that they have the information to build and help us meet our RENA numbers. And I think that's where I'm saying is, how do we solve it? And maybe it does answer that question in the next presentation.
So the developers that do this are they are like specialists in this type of funding, and they even know lenders, they even have long-term relationships with the various lenders. What they ask for the city, which I probably didn't articulate well, is how to create the environment for them to be successful. So that is, again, site control is a really big thing. It's about streamlining, permit streamlining. They often ask for fee deferrals because we have development impact fees, so they'll ask for deferrals or waivers They also ask for parking reductions. A lot of that, the state already is trumping cities on that, but parking is very expensive to provide. And it can really, roughly run anywhere between $15,000 to $50,000 per space, depending on what kind of parking, you have. So that's another common thing, or density, increasing the density, because if they can put more units on a smaller lot,
Mhm.
they'll have more rental income, and then, of course, land is expensive, right? It's one of the most expensive
Mhm.
things. So those are the tools that they will come to us and ask.
Mhm.
And we work with them to see how we can help create that environment. And I think that's what Ariana is mentioning, some of the stuff that we are gonna talk about is about what we're proposing in the housing element, hopefully will help.
It also
Thank
sounds to me that, the city could do a great job setting the stage. Meeting, for the developers, but we're still in hopes that someone steps up and takes on these projects, right?
Absolutely, and probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, for affordable housing is we have great affordable housing developers, but as I think Beatrice had a slide to show how complicated this one, it is for them to get a project off the ground because of the gaps and so forth. They only have so much capacity
Mhm.
to do it. And because it takes a long time before you get to the finish line, it feels like, my God, we're not building anything, but in the background, there's oftentimes years of, trying to.
And knowing this, when cycle 6 is over, are we gonna meet these numbers?
I have, the one thing that I think is good for Soledad in South County is our land is still much less expensive than other places in Monterey County. That's a benefit for us. And also, at least in this city, we control our water and wastewater. In the peninsula, they have a lot of restrictions because of the water. So I think we're gonna come very close. The one area,
With that said, though, are we building the affordable housing for Soledad or for the county?
well, we're hoping to build it for our residents. We do have, our hands are a little bit tied with fair housing regulations, but we're looking at ways of having local preference policies, especially for our inclusionary units. So we're working on that because we need it for our families, and it would be a shame if, people are the ones who are benefiting are not from here.
Mhm.
Especially because, to what you're saying, to some extent, I've met a lot of new Soledad residents and they came from the county. Because they couldn't afford to buy a home on the peninsula, and they love it here, and they're residents now, and that's a great thing, but. We don't wanna push out the people that are already here, we wanna build the affordable housing so they have a safe place to go.
And with that said, your last slide, where you had all the totals, can you pull that slide up, please?
While I'm doing that, if I can just add one thing, also, hold on this cycle is for affordable housing. This is how long it takes them when it's a affordable housing, 100% affordable housing project. This is their cycle. But I think what we have to our advantage in, to meet our RENA numbers is that we are not putting all of our hopes in one type of project. We have diverse type of projects, and that's the beauty of it, and the fact that we have our inclusionary ordinance. We only have a couple of projects that will be 100%, well, 540 Gavilan will be 100% affordable. Almond Acres is in partnership with Market Rate. Santa Clara is also in partnership with Market Rate, and those last two are part of our inclusionary ordinance. And that's why we need different type of projects to address this issue. There's no one project that is gonna solve them all, but I think what we have our advantage is that some of these projects have the private sector and their funds, backing up the progress of these projects.
And I guess my question with the totals was, talking about how realistic is it to meet these goals for cycle 6? There's 724 that are mandated, right? Yet
Yeah.
the totals that I see is 902.
Because, the middle section, the affordability section, if I can just highlight this, I didn't give you the above market rate because really for Arena, we're more concerned about our affordable units. But on the far column, the last column, you can see the unit totals. So for Miramonte, phase 1 and 2, we're gonna have 568. And you can keep adding all of those numbers to the last one that it's Gavilan. So all of those numbers add up 902. But out of those 902, that is split into the different categories.
Right, and I do see that there's more being billed for low, than required.
It is required, we have to build at least 65. But we know that given our demographic information, we really need to attend to the need of our community and we do need low income housing. So we are taking advantage of the fact that we have Gavilan, 540 Gavilan, that it's our site and that we have more discretion on how we request a developer to build on that property. And because we don't always have the opportunity to build or have more control or more discretion on requesting these units, now that we do have the opportunity, we need to attend to that need from our community.
And also just to add, we actually met our numbers for moderate and above moderate in the 5th cycle. We never came even close to the low and very low, so there's a pent up demand that we're sort of recognizing. And we're also trying to get pro housing designation. Hopefully that's a way of attracting more, development and helping development that we need, helping us achieve the FEMA numbers. So part of that is our goal to be pro housing, but you can see, or I should say, we're just slightly under, but we built our above moderate number of units was 80, and we built 564. So we're very skewed. And that's why we tried to do better, and the 6th round.
So how will we monitor that we are meeting our needs? We're building, the numbers are skewed. I see that, and it doesn't look like anybody monitored it because, we're here and we didn't meet our numbers. So how do we monitor it? How are we keeping track of it?
So we do have, and that will be also more aligned with Ariana's work, not necessarily Ariana, but our presentation about the housing element. But we have to complete the annual progress report. For this cycle, we were not always reporting on time. And now the state has more teeth in the game and we need to report our numbers on time. So every year, and this will be a presentation that you will receive every year towards the 1st quarter of the year, calendar year, so that you see the number of units that are being built.
I think, how have our sweat equity programs worked in the past, and are we still using those?
Say the first part again?
The sweat equity programs like Cheesebauer, where they come in and they put their experience or their skills and help building the homes and use that as equity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's great. It's a great opportunity. What happens a lot, and this I didn't mention with home ownership, but the San Vicente Apartments is a good example where it was kind of a sweat equity project. So it was great for those families to build personal financial wealth for their families. They were able to buy those homes, and then they came back to council to ask that the deed restrictions be removed off of them. So it's great because one day their children will inherit those properties and they'll sell them and they'll sell them for market rate, but it doesn't always, those types of programs often don't necessarily, you can't deed restrict. So after so many years, usually you have with ownership housing, you have a situation where over time, the equity shifts to the families. So then it could be they own them until they have 100% of the equity, they sell them and then that goes away. But with these kind of deed restrictive rental units, they have a 55-year deed restriction on them, and usually also a lot of times they're recapitalized to extend. And so that's why we also need that type of housing, because there's more certainty with the deed restrictions. But certainly I think it's a great way, because we do also want to provide pathways to opportunities for our families, and housing equity is one of those great pathways. You can use it to help your children go to college, for example. You could, take out a home loan. So it's kind of having a mix of housing, I think is important. But something we are looking at, which these ladies will preview now.
Any other questions on the affordable housing? Okay. So, Madam Chair, we can move forward to the second presentation if you like.
Yes, let's go ahead and move on to the presentation, the pro-housing designation. By Ms. Beatriz Trujillo, housing analyst.
You will still hear from me on that presentation. So this is a pro-housing designation application, and this is a new initiative from the state of California to really, distinguish those jurisdictions that are pro-housing and enable us to have some benefits. So we work with Placement. Amy, she's on the line, and she was a great help to draft this application. The pro-housing is granted by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and the benefits from this designation is that we can have scoring advantages when applying for other state funding, for other grants. And we can also have grant application preference. That may vary on how the state applies. It might be that we have a priority date, or it might be that we get the first take to some of the funding. That may vary from program to program, but this designation will enable jurisdictions to have kind of an advantage towards other jurisdictions that are no pro-housing, but they haven't been designated as pro-housing. And just to give you an idea, in Monterey County, the only jurisdiction that has the pro-housing designation is Salinas. So we have a draft application. If we submit it and we get approved, that will make us the first city or the first jurisdiction in South County to have this designation. And here I give you some of the programs or some of the initiatives through the state that this designation will enable a jurisdiction to be part of. So the Affordable Housing Sustainability Communities Grant, the Transformative Climate Communities, Infill Infrastructure Grant, and other housing and non-housing in state funding. So the application overview or the requirements, the overview of the requirements for this application has four main components, which is the threshold requirements, the scoring requirements, the enhanced requirements, and then the final stage is submittal and review. So for the threshold requirements, we need to have a compliant housing element. That will be the second presentation that we have for you today. We're hoping to get around the last stretch of the housing element. It's in good shape. The state has given us good feedback, and I think it should be adopted soon. We also need to have current annual progress reports, which are the ones that we use to make sure that every year we're actually producing those affordable housing units, and we are current. We need to have supported zoning changes, which we have done. We need housing law compliance, which once we implement the new housing element, we will be compliant. But also the designation can be revoked if we stop being compliant with one of the requirements. So this application, the pro-housing application, has a scoring requirement. This is pretty much the state will give you a checklist of the things that you should be doing, and every item will have some points that it will give you. It's different items, but you have to score at least 30 points, and that's kind of like a pre-screening. If you don't score at least 30, you cannot even submit an application. We meet the minimum requirement, but we also need to have favorable zoning and land use. We need to accelerate production timeframes, which we have done with some of the ordinances that we have drafted, or updated, I'm sorry. Reduce construction and development costs and provision of financial subsidies. And then the other component is the enhanced requirement, which is demonstrate policies that align with principles. And we are, like some policies we have implemented, some other ones we have in the pipeline, but we have enough documentation and funding committed that the state is able to see that we are in the right track or that we are pursuing, those, policies, updates or implementation. And then, we can have additional points for scoring items. So if one item we're doing above and beyond, we might get additional points. And then the submittal and review process, once we have the final draft, it has to be out for public review for 60 days. If we don't get, awarded the pro-housing designation the first time that we submit, but we get feedback, we can resubmit. It doesn't mean that we are not eligible to resubmit, but we're hoping that we can get it on the first try. And there is not a deadline to submit the application, it's on a rolling basis, but the sooner that we submit an application and that we get the pro-housing designation, it will also enable us to apply for all those, sources of funding. So this is where we're at with our application. Our score was 38 points, based on the programs that we already have. The outreach that we have conducted since we completed the draft application happened at the hot summer days, just letting people know that we created a special sub-page on our website for, the pro-housing designation. People can take a look at what we are proposing on the application, and if they have any comments, they can let us know. You can also do the same thing. It's on the city's website. On the landing page, you will see pro-housing. Take a look at it, and if you have any comments, we welcome those. And some of the highlights on our application, some of the things that we're doing already is, that we have a one-stop shop for a permitting process. We guide developers once they tell us that they want to submit an application, we try to streamline as much as possible of that process. We also have the approved ADUs, the ADU plans, and we have had workshops which were very successful. Shout out to planning and building. After those workshops, we have received more applications, so they're busy, but they're busy. And we also have an standardized entitlement application. And we have, one of the highlights from our application is also the Miramonte area specific plan, because they see that we are planning to build, and they can see it on that specific plan that the number of units that we're planning to build is a significant number for a jurisdiction our size. And that's it. I just wanted to give you a general overview on here, if you have any questions or comments.
So thank you. Are there any questions from the audience in chambers? In Zoom?
No.
No? Do any of the commissioners have any questions in regards to the presentation? Great job on the designation. Yeah, I appreciate it. See, these are the type of things that I want to hear, you know, because I'm confident that you're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, but you're not getting the credit. So if we're not hearing, you know, those kind of details, then, you know, we don't know what's happening, right? But you are, you know, providing a lot of support, not just to the developers, but also local people. I mean, it as a whole to meet our goals.
And for some reason, I thought I had planned to have this presentation first and then the affordable housing workshop, but I made a mistake. But my idea was to give you this information first and then the affordable housing information, but now you have the information.
Thank you.
And I do wanna say thank you so much for Megan and Beatrice for helping us prepare the pro-housing designation. As Beatrice says, a lot of jurisdictions in the state of California are really, it's really hard for them to score a minimum of 30 points, even so on the pro-housing application. So we were very happy that we were able to score 38. And so hopefully we are able to become pro-housing designated, because just to give you a quick example, there's this little city called Needles, California. It's really, really small. And it was actually one of the first pro-housing designations, and they got so much CDBG housing grants, but they can't find a developer to build their homes, right? So, so for us, if we're able to get it, we can then also apply for those CDBG grants and hopefully help with first-time home buyer business loans, or you know, grow our housing programs here in the city to help our local community. So I want to say thank you so much to Beatrice and Megan for taking the lead on this, and hopefully with the submission, we'll be able to get designated.
Yeah, and just really recognition, shout out to Megan. She made it very clear to the state that this is harder for smaller jurisdictions. It's harder for us because we have less resources. Up until this year, the amount of floors that you can have in a building is less because we don't have as many resources in our fire department. We're barely getting the ladder truck. So all of that plays a role. And also shout out to Amy. She really did a lot of the work, helping us put this together.
Thank you.
Any questions? No? Great job, thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on. Yeah, to public hearings. So the next item on the agenda, public hearings. The first one we have is PH-1 resolution number 2024-05, a resolution of the planning commission of the city of Soledad, reviewing the findings and recommendations that the planning commission of city of Soledad adopt an addendum to the 2005 general plan environmental impact report and determine the implementation of the 2023-2031 housing element that does not require further analysis pursuant to the California Environment Quality Act, CEQA. And together, both, okay, so resolution number 2024-06, a resolution of the planning commission of the city of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the planning commission of the city of Soledad consider the adoption of the 2023 through 2031 city of Soledad housing element and authorize staff to make non-policy revisions to the housing element in response to future Department of Housing and Community Development comments. Okay.
I do apologize, Chair, for such a long resolution, but we would have to do action for both because the addendum would need to be adopted, and then the housing element would need to be recommended.
Okay. So,
But you did a great job, Chair.
thank you. So how do we want to do
Go
this?
ahead and just have staff do the staff report.
Okay, so next up, we'll have the staff report.
Perfect. And I'm still here, but I just want to start the new presentation saying that even though I'm the housing analyst now in Kent, we're also lucky to have Ken and our team. A lot of the work that happened to get the housing element to where it is right now, happened thanks to Ariana and Megan. So even though I'm starting this presentation, it's their work for like the last year or more. And this is, we're gonna start with defining the housing element. And the housing element, as you probably already know, is a policy document that the state requires and is part of the Soledad general plan. We're also updating our general plan. So this is a component, it's one of the elements that are part of that general plan. The state law also requires that the State Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, reviews the housing elements for compliance every 8 years. So this we update every 8 years along with our RHNA numbers. Our last housing element was from 2015 to 2023. So really, we're currently out of compliance. We were supposed to complete this draft before the end of 2023. It's been a combination of being short-staffed on our end, and also the state is taking longer to review. We did submit our first draft in December, but it had revisions and it took longer on both of our ends, the cities and the state. So defining a housing element and its requirements. So the housing element goals is to access and address constraints to housing development. It's also to provide an assessment on housing needs. It also analyzes the progress towards implementing the previous housing element. So how well we did with the previous element and what are the updates that need to happen in order to have a more successful next housing element. It will also guide the future housing development for the next 8 years. So this is kind of the contribution to housing development for the next 8 years. And the project timeline. So this project was started last year at the beginning of the calendar year. In April to November, staff conducted community engagement. In December of 2023, the first draft was submitted to HCD, but they had a 90-day initial review period. On June 7th, they provided their comments, and on June 17th, we submitted, on actually. Sorry, on June 17, we received a letter of conditional compliance from HCD, which means that what we have submitted is good to HCD, but now they want at least 2 public hearings, this is one of them, from the planning commission and from our city council to make sure that you are also in agreement with what we have submitted. This is something that at this point, at this time of the night, I think you're already very familiar with. These are arena numbers, but this is the need of the housing element. Everything that is on the document, it's around creating the policies, programs, infrastructure needed to meet the arena numbers. And this is the one that you already saw from the upper level housing presentation. And since Ariana did a lot of the work on the housing element engagement, I'll let her take that over from here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So, as Beatrice was mentioning, we did do a period of engagement, not only through a housing element workshop, but we also committed to a Dia de los Muertos event to really target the population of Soledad and really listen to them, what their housing needs were, what type of housing they wanted, what kind of income housing they wanted us to focus, but also what other needs to obtain their goal of owning a house is needed. So throughout this engagement since April through November, we learned and gathered all that feedback, and hopefully we tried to reflect all this engagement into the current policy and programs. And we'll get into that into more detail, but the staff report presented to you all has all the list of programs and policies. And we'll get into detail which ones are new and which ones have been continued in order to fulfill those 724 homes that we need to meet. With this engagement, again, we had workshops, pop-ups. We also tried using our local farmers market to target the Soledad community. And we had community events, as I mentioned, the Dia de los Muertos. And also having public hearings. We want to make sure that those that are really consistent with not only planning commission meetings, but also city council meetings, understand that this is a document that needs to be created and crafted by public opinion and public engagement in order to really understand what the next few policies for the city of Soledad should be. Once again, going back to the housing pipeline and projects, this is just another breakdown of the summary of projects here in Soledad based on our RHNA numbers and income categories. So for vacant sites, we have to identify different vacant sites in Soledad currently that could have potential to meet housing. And we see that 135 vacant sites, 18 can meet within the extreme low, very low and low income. 50 of them can meet around the moderate income, and anything above that is presumed to be is presumed to be above moderate income. Now, with looking at the site capacity in Soledad and also different already developed projects, we're also looking how can we make more increased density in existing housing sites if it's able to, regarding infrastructure and the surrounding environment. So we also have to take into consideration when we really look into sites to make sure that their capacity are used at it's a maximum, but also taking into consideration the environment around them. Those would be considered underutilized sites, and within Soledad, we determined that there's around 24 of those sites that can be either increased in density or changed to have more housing units than what they currently need. An example of that could be an existing commercial zoned area where maybe it's zoned mixed commercial and they're able to build up and increase units on top and keep their commercial use at the bottom. So that still keeps us, gives us more units. So we're looking at sites like that, specifically also located in our downtown specific area, where a lot of the mixed use is being concentrated currently under our zoning. So we want to make sure we think strategically with zoning and efforts to use the maximum capacity and make more housing units. With this chart, we also took into consideration pipeline projects, which Beatriz has, described already and you are all familiar with. Out of that, we are accounting around 333, and then with Miramonte, we're also taking into consideration those 500 units for phase 1 and 2. With this pipeline project chart, we're also projecting ADU projection within the next 8 years. We're aiming to have around 85 ADUs, and that's just consistent within the next 8 years. Right now, it's on my understanding that we currently have around 60 just for this year, so we presume to have more within the 8 years, if not at least 85. Lastly, we do have to plan for surplus property just to make sure we meet the appropriate RHNA number. So this goes back to the project pipeline chart where that in Beatriz's presentation, where we're counting 902. Some of those may be a surplus units that will allow us to have some wiggle room to make sure that we meet those 722 required or the goal of having and accommodating for those RHNA numbers. Next, this is where we'll be talking about the housing element, goals, policies, and programs. The housing element has 6 goals and they are stated in the staff report within the chart. The goals are highlighted and the first goal is adequate housing sites, focus on new development and redevelopment, housing opportunities for all, conservation, preservation, and improvement, removal of housing constraints, and the last one is fair housing. So the housing element, as a sense, is focused throughout the 6 goals, and the goal of the housing element is to provide goals, policies, and programs that will meet the city's goals as described here. So we'll go into depth of each goal and how they are being proposed in the housing element per policy and for housing program. Right now, in order to meet these 6 goals, we are proposing 14 policies that will be establishing housing production. And it's more of a government policy that will be able to focus and really prioritize housing programs and or housing production. With that being said, we are proposing 49 different programs focusing on prevention and maybe intervention or incentives to create more housing units here or retain and keep affordable units within the city of Soledad. So that's something to consider. Again, the chart is located in the staff report. In this next slide, some of this information may be a little different, but ultimately what we wanted to present was the new housing element programs. What we have to consider is that out of the 49 programs, some of them are reoccurring from the previous housing element. The new housing element programs are determined per each goal, and I can bring a brief summary that for goal 1, we are trying to focus in order to keep adequate sites. We want to make sure we think strategically with zoning. So if there's areas that are single family and we already see that it has a potential for multifamily housing in the future within the planning period, you want to make sure we consider that and take that into account and maximize the site density. Or maybe it currently only has 1 site and it's zoned for multifamily. Maybe we want to get in contact with the property owner, provide an incentive and make more housing units in order to be at capacity for their needed density. In addition, and it's not within the goal 1, we're also accounting the Miramonte specific plan area, which is where we want to make sure that the Miramonte specific plan area has adequate site for housing. With that being said, we want to make sure they're also conforming with affordable housing requirements. Currently within their phase 1 and 2, they are proposing a senior housing project, but until that project comes forward, it'll be forward to the city council for approval. It'll be more set in stone and affordability will be determined. Lastly, we have to consider the large sites. As we mentioned, the small subdivision lots and those incentives, we want to make sure that all available land existing within Soledad is used appropriately and efficiently. So that's also another program that we want to focus here in Soledad. For goal number 2, the new program is not only for homelessness prevention and including for housing opportunities, but also we're focusing on ADUs. As it's also another state mandate, we wanna make sure that ADUs, are easier and more streamlined, so we did do more pre-approved ADUs, so if there's many other incentives the city can look into to make and create more affordable housing. ADUs can be, somewhat affordable per design, meaning it is a little cheaper to build, but, can still create more units per Soledad, and they are counted towards our RENA numbers. So all ADUs, that will be built within the next 8 years will be counted for, in the RENA cycle.
And they get counted as low or very low? What does it get counted as?
It depends, so if the existing house is restricted or a multifamily, because there could also be ADUs and multifamily districts. If they're de-restricted with a specific affordable level, they have to also be de-restricted to ADUs. So if some are built with that such de-restriction will count it towards that specific income. If they are not, they'll most likely be between moderate or above moderate.
I have a question.
Mhm.
The teacher housing,
Mhm.
do those get, did they make these numbers?
No, because the RENA is only focused for completed construction units, so the teacher housing currently is still in progress. And hasn't been built or a building permit hasn't been issued. So until the construction ends, which we anticipate them ending within this planning period, it'll be counted for the 6th cycle.
But was it in the slides before? Was it taken into account, you know, for the
Other
projected
pipeline
projects?
projects?
Yeah, I didn't
Yes.
see it.
Yeah.
Was it really?
Maybe because they had an acronym, it had,
SUSD.
Okay,
Mhm.
I didn't see it, that's all.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so then for goal 3, sorry, I confused goal 3 and goal 2, but goal 2 is new development and redevelopment, providing, provide city funding and site acquisition. One of the examples that we've seen tonight is the 540 Gavilan. So we are able to acquire sites throughout Soledad and provide an incentive to create more affordable housing. It'll make us achieve goal number 2 for new development and redevelopment in the area. For goal number 3, this is the housing opportunities for all. And then this goal really focuses more on home buyer education and opportunities. First-time home buyer funding and other programs to make sure everything it captures the entire population within Soledad. And more specific programs are located in the chart again within the staff report. For goal number 4, there is conservation, preservation, and improvement. So we wanna make sure, we added mobile home modernization, so we wanna make sure we also account for the mobile home residents within the area, even though some of it is still within the jurisdiction of HCD. We also wanna make sure we have relocation assistant programs in case they need to change something within their existing home and they need to be relocated temporarily. We wanna make sure we come up with specific programs within the next years of implementing this housing element to make sure that population is also accounted for. And lastly, housing condition assessment. Again, some of this can be due to the deterioration of existing housing units. So if there is population that needs help with repairing or restoring their existing home, we want to make sure we can also account that population in efforts to help them. Lastly, goal number 5 is the removal of constraints. So this relates more towards pro-housing, and making sure, we focus more on streamlining permits, actually, yes. Streamlining permits, making it easier to build housing units within Soledad. And then, maybe even deferring impact fees or looking into programs, how to reduce fees within development. Lastly, goal number 6 is fair housing, and we'll talk a little bit more about fair housing. There was already a fair housing program in the current housing element, and it makes a lot of different commitments that may not be as feasible to what it is now to Soledad. So we just revamped it a little and made that chapter into compliance with state law to make sure it fits to the Soledad needs. Yeah, and we'll talk more about fair housing.
And for housing, it's a new component to the housing element. This is where we were saying that the state is now having more keys and they're also being more proactive and getting more involved in making sure that jurisdictions are being more intentional about how housing. First, that housing is getting built, and also that when we're building affordable housing, we're not segregating or discriminating people with lower incomes. So, and this applies for policies and for programs. This, affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH, because we needed more one acronym. Is a new component, and this is part of the Assembly Bill, 686. And it became a requirement on January 1st, 2021. And some of the things that are covered through AFFH is prevent segregation, foster inclusive communities, and this is, inclusive also in income, so we have different income levels living within the same communities, within the same neighborhoods. Also, that we don't have an area, and I think we've seen it in our community, that there are some areas where the lower income housing is built, and it's not just lower income housing, but it's also not in the best shape. We had close to Campora, a community that was low income, away from services. It wasn't close to an area of opportunity, and that all the people that were living there were low or very low income residents. This new requirement aims to prevent that from happening. And also, if that's already happening, what are we doing to improve the conditions? Housing discrepancies and housing needs, making sure that if we are allocating more resources, time, funding to some areas, and we are neglecting some other ones, that we're balancing those out, that we're also creating the programs that we need. And also that we are preventing displacement. Those are the bigger elements that are being implemented through this new requirement. And I'm gonna turn it back to Ariana.
Thank you. And before we move over to, focusing on the addendum, and touching in on the CEQA matter, we have to consider that, you know, a lot of these programs that have been proposed in the chart and provided in the staff report are coming from the community engagement, that we've done. So that is really a big focus. And if you have any questions regarding specific programs on that, we're more than happy to answer. But as I mentioned, we have our 6 goals that we want to make sure we meet, and the proposed programs are trying to meet those specific goals. So for goal 1, again, having adequate sites. Goal 2, new development and redevelopment. Goal 3, housing opportunities for all, which includes home buyer programs, homeless prevention, home buyer education and opportunities. So those are just the different programs that the housing element is proposing in order for us to not only develop and increase housing production to meet that RHNA, but also to get our community to really retain those units and keep them within themselves. Whether it's for them to start in a renting place or go towards ownership. So we want to make sure, again, going back to education, the city is also prioritizing that within the next cycle in order to meet and keep those units affordable here in Soledad. So before I move on to the CEQA, is there any questions regarding this part of the presentation? Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll start with a brief description of what an addendum is. We did provide some information ahead of time to the Planning Commission regarding an addendum, which pretty much is a required by law, the environmental California Environmental Quality Act. An EIR is an addendum prepared according to CEQA guidelines when changes are needed for an approved project. It is used for minor modifications rather than major changes for an environmental impact report. So when creating a general plan, back in 2005, the city created an environmental impact report to really assess the environmental, and as an environmental analysis through the proposed changes of a general plan. Right now, with this housing element, we proposed an addendum where pretty much highlights what the programs are proposing will not cause a significant a significant impact to the existing, development and or not cause further environmental analysis. The sites in the housing element do not require any designation or zone changes. Therefore, they don't have or meet that level of threshold to have a significant impact. The proposed changes won't lead to a new, important environmental effects or substantial increase in severity of previously identified significant events requiring any major analysis that was already analyzed through the 2005 EIR. Therefore, no further environmental analysis is needed per CEQA guidelines 15162. In order to recommend approval of the housing element, the planning commission does have to, understand the document being presented, the addendum, and vote on it first. If it's approved and consistent with, what was presented tonight. And if it does get approved, then we can move forward with the housing element recommendation for approval to city council. In the case the planning commission does not think it's consistent or does not think it'll propose major significant, or it does propose major significant impacts, the housing element would not be able to move forward as it depends on the CEQA to really, meet the checkbox of the California Environmental Quality Act. So that's something important to note there. As we, learned all the policy and programs within the housing element, staff has considered that the addendum is sufficient and no major changes will cause significant environmental impacts. All right, and lastly, to go back with, the housing element, we want to conclude the presentation and emphasize that the housing element is designed to identify the housing needs of the community. So if there's any questions or clarifications that you think should be also addressed, we can make that clarification. As I said, throughout the presentation, and Beatriz has emphasized as well, the housing element focuses on the housing production, rehabilitation, conservation, and really establishes those policies and programs that will guide the development of housing in Soledad for the next 8 years. The timeline for completion of this, as Beatriz mentioned, was due back in December of 2023 due to staff, but also funding, because housing elements are very expensive for current jurisdictions. We have allocated, I believe it says $171,000 to create this document. And as a small community, that could really be a cost burden. So some of the delay was also to grab funding and really allocate money to create this document. And I'm sure other jurisdictions have the same issue as well for funding. Lastly, if considered tonight for recommendation to the city council, the goal is to take it to August 7th and to the city council. And if city council approves, then we will submit to HCD, and then they have 60 days for a final review for them to really make sure everything's in compliance and everything's good to go before we get final certification. So we aim to have final certification by early October 2024. In order to be at compliance as soon as possible, since we're right now in the red zone of being pointed out by HCD and not being able to qualify for future grant funding programs that require us to be up to date with our current housing element. But again, if there's any questions or clarifications, staff is able to answer on that, and that concludes this presentation.
I also do want to add, the housing element is an element of our general plan. Our general plan, of course, gets updated every 20 years, but the housing element gets updated every 8 years. But in order for our 2045 general plan to be fully up to par in regards of how we're planning it out, we want to make sure that we do have a certified and adoptable housing element in order to complete our general plan update for the city of Soledad. So, okay.
So thank you very much. At this time, we will open the public hearing to hear comments and or any concerns about item number, and it's both of them? Okay, okay. PH1, resolution number 2024-05, a resolution of the planning commission of the City of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of Soledad adopt an addendum to the 2005 General Plan Environment Impact Report and determine that implementation of the 2023 through 2031 housing element does not require further analysis pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, the CEQA, and resolution number 2024-06, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad consider the adoption of the 2023 through 2031 City of Soledad housing element and authorize staff to make non-policy revisions to the housing element in response to future Department of Housing and Community Development comments. All right, so we will
Open the public hearing.
open to public hearing. Do we have any comments here in chambers? Oh, via Zoom?
None via Zoom.
None via Zoom, okay, how about, and so if there's no comments, and we're hearing none, we will close the public hearing and move on to discussion. And so do we have any commissioners who have any questions or comments in regards to these items? No, no questions.
I guess I just have a question. We talk about the goals, like
Which one? Sorry?
goals or
Yeah.
six goals. How were the goals picked,
How were the goals
like identified?
identified?
Yeah.
Some of the goals were, so a lot of this content, again, to reduce, if I'm not mistaken, to reduce costs, some of this content was from the past housing element. So we brought forward what really is worked or we were trying to implement from the past and see how feasible it is to our current community and engagement. I also think we also have to meet specific goals such as fair housing. It is a requirement per state law that the cities do have to comply with fair housing laws and has to be one of our goals. So we have to set specific programs in order to meet that. In addition, those goals are also set to represent really the biggest needs within the community of Soledad. As we've done our engagement and gathered the information from the past, from our previous housing element, that we still think that, again, through the engagement and the process of this document still works with what Soledad is now. And we also have Amy on Placeworks, who is our consultant. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add on that, Amy, regarding the goals?
Hi, good evening, everyone. No, I think you pretty much covered it. Since right before the meeting, I was looking back at all the goals and from last time in the current draft, and it's pretty similar. There were 7 goals last time and there are 6 this time. So the energy conservation goal was folded into the constraints related goal. I think otherwise it's pretty similar. They're very high level, and then the details are underneath in the policies and programs.
I think where we really changed was, or added more was on the programs, in order to meet those goals. As mentioned, in the chart, I believe some of them are, I don't know, policies are highlighted. But, some of the, programs that we added was homelessness prevention. And I think we also increased a little bit more on homebuyer education programs. So as we mentioned, it's also a really big need within the community of Soledad. Not only to understand what affordable housing is, but how can we, well, that is the biggest one, what affordable housing is, but also to make sure what opportunities are there for them, whether it's rental or housing, and what really fits within their own income and goals.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding Exhibit A, if you're able to address that, or
Yeah.
1.2, the general plan EIR.
Mhm.
The first paragraph states that public services, traffic and circulation, hazards, flooding are all mitigated to less than significant.
Mhm.
Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, so when we are considering different sites, we are also taking into account infrastructure, traffic, noise, and different, levels of CEQA. When we are considering it as less than significant, we are determining that for right now, the specific programs and policies we have in the housing element will not trigger that level yet until an actual let's say an actual development project comes to life, and then we reanalyze CEQA and really think, okay, is this project really going to affect traffic? And from that, then we make that conclusion of CEQA that maybe it'll have significant impact. And that specific project will then have to do their own environmental analysis. But for right now, because we're focusing on the top tier of the program, such as, let's say, homeless prevention, that's just an idea, and it's not really going to cause any significant impact to traffic right now.
Mhm.
But let's say we want to create a specific site just for temporary housing, then we would analyze the environmental impacts then and really try to make sure we comply with the California Environmental Quality Act.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes,
Huh?
so leads into my next question for the next paragraph. That says the general plan EIR determined that implementation of a general plan would result in significant and unavoidable impacts. And then it lists the same items. So is that different? Sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
understanding. That could be
So
wrong.
here's the situation, and Amy can correct me if I'm explaining it a little bit wrong. But, so the general plan, we have an EIR for the general plan that did an analysis. And because we were changing zoning and other things which are in place right now, we had significant and avoidable impacts from some of those increases. We try to mitigate as much as possible, but ultimately CEQA is a public review document, which is meant for a decision maker, when you do an EIR to say, you know, I have concerns, but you can still move forward with a project even when you have significant environmental impacts. So way back in 2005, the planning commission at the time recommended adoption of the general plan, and the council, even though there were unavoidable impacts, said, you know, we still want the project. So all of the development that you see in the pipeline, which is the stuff that would have the impacts, has already been analyzed and is already consistent with the general plan. A lot of what you see in the housing element is actually an implementation of the general plan, and it's subtle changes with programs and other things that don't have that environmental impact, because the physical impact was already analyzed through the general plan. Does that make sense?
Yes, I was
Okay.
just making sure that I was reading it wrong.
Enough, addressed in 2.3 findings, correct? Most of the things that you just stated are in there.
Yes.
Okay, just double check.
And if, I don't know if Amy or if Mike's still on the line, if you want that.
Yeah, I would just add that I think Megan already said this, but the addendum is just confirming that the analysis that you asked about from the EIR from 2005, that analysis still stands for this policy document. So there are no impacts that are greater than those that you were looking at on those pages as a result of the housing element.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to confirm my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong in what I'm thinking or processing through reading and then today's meeting, is that the addendum and the housing element are a combination of the community's requests and needs based on the information that you gathered, bringing forward certain things that were working from the previous plan, as well as marrying them with the new state requirements that are law, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to a motion to approve or deny the public hearing item. PH one -1, resolution number 2024-05, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad, reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad adopt an addendum to the 2005 General Plan Environmental Impact Report and determine the implementation of the 2023 through 2031 housing element does not require further analysis pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. And resolution number 2024-06, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad consider the adoption of the 2023 through 2031 City of Soledad housing element and authorize staff to make non-policy revisions to the housing element in response to future Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. And comments.
And then this is a quick question to our city attorney who's online. Mike, do they have to have a motion for each separate resolution or can they do it for both? You're on mute if you're trying to let me know.
There we go. Sorry about that. They could do it as a joint action for both resolutions at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Can we get a motion?
I motion that we approve PH1 resolution number 2024-05. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad adapt an addendum to the 2005 General Plan Environmental Impact Report and determine the implementation of the 2023 through 2031 housing element does not require further analysis pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and resolution number 2024-06, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad reviewing the findings and recommending that the Planning Commission of the City of Soledad consider the adoption of the 2023-2031 City of Soledad housing element, authorize staff to make non-policy revisions to the housing element in response to future Department of Housing and Community Development, parentheses, HCD, parentheses, comments.
Is there a second by a commission?
I'll second.
Okay, so first, motion set by, Planning Commissioner member Sandy Fuerte, seconded by, Planning Commissioner member Lorenzo Sanchez. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Josie Perez Aguilera,
Aye, in favor.
Vice Chair Sergio Diaz,
Yes. Aye.
Commissioner Sandy Fuerte,
Aye.
Commissioner Roberto Cruz,
Aye.
Commissioner Lorenzo Sanchez.
Aye.
Okay, so motion passed with 5 in favor, all commissioners, and so, thank you, city staff. Okay, so next up, we have our community, and economic developmental report.
So, I don't have anything listed right here for you guys, but I do want to let you guys know in regards of, some of the developments that have happened here at the city. We are working on, 2 housing projects right now, which is the Almond Acres project, as well as the, school district housing program, workforce housing as well. I believe there is gonna be the school district item will be taken to the city council, on July 17th. For that project. So then once the city council has approved that, then we can start working on, the construction process and getting that all hopefully built soon. And then, in regards of the Almond Acres property, that is also an affordable housing, project as well. That is in collaboration with Chispa. So, we are excited to get that one to get started in regards of entitlement as well. So, put that on your radar, commissioners. We're working on a lot of process right now in regards of housing. In regards of commercial, we do have Panda Express, as I stated to you guys, Panda Express did break ground, so we're super excited about that. Right on the corners of Nestles and Los Coches. And so if you guys see the green fencing, that is where Panda Express will be. Right next door, commissioners, you guys already approved of a CUP for a hotel. And we did receive our site plan review and architectural review design for that hotel that will be coming to you guys as commissioners as the architectural design review committee to review and approve sometime within the next couple months. So you guys can so we can get your recommendation, your approvals for that specific project. So we're excited for that one also to come online. And also, as you guys also see, we also have the DeVitas that is being built right now. It is an extension the existing DaVitas. From what I'm aware, the Knee Memorial Dialysis in King City did close down. So Soledad is the only dialysis center in South County. And our dialysis center here in the city of Soledad was very, very small. It was only taking so much. And Salinas was always really, really packed. So DaVita has decided to do the expansion, and that's why it is now located at the Soledad Marketplace area. So if anybody had any kind of questions, what's being built right now is the DaVitas. And so we're super excited just because we're able to provide that type of service to the community, especially South County here, because we understand that Salinas was very impacted in regards to the dialysis center. But that's all I have for you guys as commissioners. But if you guys have any other additional questions or any additional inquiries, please feel free to reach out to me. And in regards of economic development, please feel free to reach out to Vencio Vargas, who is our economic development coordinator.
Great. Any questions? No, I do have one question on the teacher housing. When is the project being, the construction starting?
So we are in the process of doing an at-risk plan review check for the construction plans right now. We don't have an actual breaking ground date yet, but we're waiting on, of course, the city and the school district to finish their negotiations in regards of their purchase agreement. And then once that happens, then we can start the process in regards of doing a full construction review.
Just to add, we actually have the acquisition on the agenda for July 17th.
Okay.
But it's complicated because they're former redevelopment properties. So we have to go to all of the different taxing entities to get permission for them to sell, for us to sell those properties, because they have a interest in that. So maybe we'll reach out to you and ask for your support, letters and such, to try to get that process moving, because we have the cemetery district, the Mission Rec district, and so forth.
So while that is happening in the background in regards of getting the assessment district, the planning division, the building division, we're gonna see if we can try and coincide and do everything in conjunction so we can get development done quicker. So even though they're all at risk right now, we want to make sure that when and if the purchase does go through, and then we can just go boom, 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 boom in regards of development. So we're lining all our ducks in a row right now, but currently right now, there is not an action like an ETA, but we're hopeful that we'll get something by the end of the year.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Seeing that we have no comments, we'll move on to the next item, commissioner announcements and reports. So, Lorenzo.
So last time we met, it was a grand opening of Dutch Brothers. And I've been there several times.
Yay.
I'm glad to see that they're thriving, that they're flourishing, they're constantly busy. And I did speak to the manager at that time, and learned a little bit about the Dutch Brothers motto and method, the way they operate. And it's just, refreshing hearing positive attitudes, positive feedback, and an opportunity for a lot of our residents, especially the young residents, for job opportunities. So I'm glad that they came into the area and looking forward to future development.
So just a couple of comments. The Thursday farmers market, great job. I stopped by and I talked to people so keep that up and they're doing a great job. And then the hot summer days was awesome. Great job.
Yay.
And that's it.
It was a hot summer day.
It was
Yes, it was.
Honest.
yeah.
No reports then?
I just wanted to thank staff for a great job in making sure that we were well informed and were able to have a fairly quick discussion in regards as to what needed to happen for today and moving forward with the general plan and the housing element. So I know it takes a lot of work, and the presentations were you know, concise and clear. So I greatly appreciate all the hard work that you guys do. And I know that you're not usually told that, so I wanted to make sure to give you a big thank you, especially during this time frame when it's, you know, the end of the closing of the fiscal year and the beginning of the new one, and then making sure that you're meeting all compliance issues. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
I concur. Thank you. Right, so, any staff comments or correspondence?
So I want to say thank you guys commissioners for recommending the adoption of the housing element. I do want to commend once again Adiana and Megan for their hard work on the housing element. I know Beatrice and I started here in January, but a housing element, being a director and working in planning for a good amount of time is a huge feat in regards of it. And for them to be able to crank one out as great and as detail oriented in regards to the programs and goals and policies for the city of Soledad, I want to commend them for all their hard work, and I'm sure there's sleepless nights in regards to the housing element. So thank you guys so much for all your hard work, and I do appreciate you guys as commissioners for being patient with us as well, and I'm very grateful for my staff to be able to give you guys as much information as possible prior to the meeting, and we're always here and available for any kind of questions or clarifications. But and also we will be taking it to city council on August 7th. So if you guys would love to come and also support your recommendation to city council, that would be also very great for us as well.
Thank you. Any other staff comments? No. Okay, thank you very much. The last item on the agenda, the adjournment. Thank you everyone for attending. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is August 8th, 2024. Until then, thank you and have a great night. 8:24.